we are in an existential struggle with Russia, and we can either fight it with Ukraine intact and enthusiastic on our side, or we can wait until Ukraine is beaten and then try and do it on our own. And I fear we're taking the second option at the moment. And I think, in a way, this underlines the gulf between even a sort of fringe of the American media and political landscape, which is Tucker Carlson, who used to be a sort of mainstream Fox News interviewer and is now slightly fallen off the edge of the spectrum, but is still in the kind of recognizable Western world where you ask a question and get an answer, and then you ask another question and get another answer, rather as we're going to do today. Whereas Putin is in the world where when the top guy's speaking, nobody interrupts and he goes on for half an hour. You may remember when Colonel Gaddafi of Libya used to go to the UN General Assembly. I think he used to speak sometimes for 2 or 3 hours in his slot. And it's a sort of dictatorial way of talking. And I just loved watching Tucker.
The brothers that ran Cuba used to be a big fan of that as well. You know, speeches that lasted for 8 hours at a time and things.
Yes, so speech is almost as long as the Castro cigars, and it was just very interesting watching Tucker's eyes as he tried to look sort of interested and engaged, when clearly this is not something that would ever happen in the American shows that he hosts, and yet he's trying to hold up Putin as being the much misunderstood guy on the other side of the world who's unfairly got at by the sort of globalist, liberal, corporatist elite. And that didn't really work. And of course, added to that is the fact that Putin's history lecture is basically nonsense. And even if you are expert enough in Russian history to follow the thread, you just realize there's factual error after factual error, logical leap after logical leap. And then, of course, there was the actual content about, we're not going to stop till we've, quote, denazified Ukraine. And I just wish that Tucker Carlson had shown even a sliver of journalistic integrity and pushed back at some point. There were so many falsehoods from Putin. He should have just been that he's, I think, is trying to instrumentalize Putin as part of the Trump re-election campaign. And I'm not sure if this has really worked or not, but that's what he was trying.
Yeah, I have to say, I think there's a lot of people that have been pretty sniffy about the idea that this was a stupid thing to do. It was always going to end this way. But actually, I do think that there is a role for Western journalists to be able to question. It's quite intriguing that this is the interview the Kremlin took when they've been rejecting so many other interview requests, and they have. I do also wonder about the audience back home. The Republican Party now. I mean, the international community is crying out for some Ronald Reagan Republicans that kind of recognise that who the good guys and the bad guys are in all of this. It seems like the world is slightly on its head.
It's absolutely on its head, and perhaps worse than that. I think we are now seeing in Europe that our security is in the hands of a couple of hundred of crazy or perhaps cowardly is a better word, congressional Republicans who are willing to let Ukraine twist in the wind and suffer terrible casualties in order to score political points against Joe Biden. And this is, I think, a huge shock to Europe. Belatedly, we're realizing that we can't rely on America anymore. This is undoing the sort of bargain that was done with the Normandy beaches and the Berlin airlift. And we're suddenly realizing that we, whether it's Britain or continental Europe, but we over here on this side of the Atlantic, we're on our own. We can't rely on the Americans anymore. And they are, and in a way, Tucker Carlson's sort of stunt in Moscow just exemplifies how mad the world's become and how dangerously exposed we are in it.
Indeed. And of course, an expansionist autocratic nation like Russia knows it and can see it. And if they succeed in Ukraine, this is an existential war. I mean, they will not stop in Ukraine.
You're absolutely right. And I think that we have made a terrible error in not helping Ukraine win early. I think I said either perhaps on your show or somewhere else on Times Radio at the start that we are in an existential struggle with Russia, and we can either fight it with Ukraine intact and enthusiastic on our side, or we can wait until Ukraine is beaten and then try and do it on our own. And I fear we're taking the second option at the moment. And we will be, if we fail in Ukraine, we will be a very tempting target. Our credibility will be down the pan. And it will be very tempting for Putin to think, why don't I try something in the Baltic States or in the High North or elsewhere in the Black Sea, and just show that the NATO is now a paper tiger. Its European members are disunited, don't spend enough on defence, don't have any stockpiles of weapons, can't really do anything. They depend on the United States. And look, the United States is now busy with its own stuff. And so that will be a hugely tempting target for Putin. And we're almost inviting him to take it.